But here's what we ended up finding. When the school kids came, we came right down on the center of the hearth. This is called an H hearth, and it's today they're referred to as a hall parlor hearth. The hall being what they would have called the kitchen, or we call the kitchen, they called the hall. This is the north side of the house. This hearth from one side to the other, this is just the last, I think it's 6 courses of brickwork left. But this hearth in its heyday was a little over 8 feet wide. It measured from one shoulder to the other on the interior, 8 feet 6 inches. And all this burning that you see in front of this flagstone that we backfilled over and covered up because it was nothing. When we uncover this, all this is ash. That's from cooking and cook fires and things like that. And we're going through the ash, and in one corner of the hearth, still, and this is, remember, this is the kitchen hearth, Craig uncovers a whalebone vertebrae. It's just sitting there. First, we're, what God's name is this? But on further discovery and looking closer at it, this whalebone vertebrae is covered with chopping marks. So what's happening is whoever is cooking, the woman that's working in this hearth is using this whalebone vertebrae to prepare food that she's going to pitch in her pot. I think that's in the...
That's upstairs in the
upstairs as well.
It's about this big.
Yeah, the only, a very good friend of mine, James, found a very similar situation. He did a site down in Wellfleet that today is being dug, the Wellfleet Tavern. He dug that site in, I think it was 1978, and they find an almost identical artifact. It's a whalebone vertebrae covered with chop marks that they're using. These people used every bit of any animal that they took the life of. They didn't throw anything away, and here's an opportunity. We've got this perfect giant vertebrae, so let's use it for a chopping block. So that's sitting there. This side of the hearth would have been the parlor, their sitting room, sleeping room. And again, both of these hearths, they're back to back, so this hearth as well is 8 feet and some odd inches. And in the parlor, we start finding a lot of material culture. And what we discover is the majority of it is redeposited. This house has obviously been taken away, and the reason we're finding most of the whole bricks that we found are parts of this hearth that are still sitting there, and then a few scattered bricks. But the majority of this chimney and the chimney mass for this hearth system would have been enormous. It would have required thousands of bricks to build. Most of those bricks were salvaged. When they moved this house off the site, people robbed the site. That's a term that we've given it. I don't know what they called it. I have a good friend of mine sitting in the audience that robs sites all the time. But people took usable material, and rather than throw it away, they're going to use it somewhere else. So even a lot of the foundation stones are taken away. They're robbed from the site, so we're finding only pieces of the foundations. And the same thing is happening with the hearth. So once the house is taken away, they want to backfill this site because they're going to, ultimately we discover in the 19th century it's been being used as grazing land, as meadowland. And you can't set any kind of sheep or cows, right? If you put them out in this kind of stuff, you're going to be shooting them all day because they're all going to have broken legs. So they want to terrace this and make it usable again. So they do that, and we can see in our sidewall profiles where they're moving land to backfill the site where the house used to be. And that's where redeposited artifacts come from. We can actually see where they were pushing artifacts that were out in the yard into the house. And there are areas where you find higher concentrations of material culture because there is a door there or a window there, same with the back of the house. Stuff is just getting thrown out in the yard. And in other parts of the site, where it's just a wall, there's no material culture, it's just completely filled. But in this parlor side, seems to be an inordinate amount of earlier material cultural artifacts. We find a lot of pipes, pipe stems, pipe bowls, and there are methods of dating those artifacts. You do it by the bore and the size of the pipe bowl itself. The earlier 17th century pipes tend to be a smaller bowl with a larger bore. Tobacco becomes more prevalent. There's moving around, it's becoming cheaper, the pipes get bigger, the cuts get nicer, so the bores get smaller. So there are means of, you can't date them exactly, but generally within a decade or two. But one of the odd things we're finding is there's almost a line of division right across the site. The south side of the site, the artifacts seem to date from 1650 earlier. You go to the north side of the site and you've got a period of transition that goes from 1650 all the way up to the early 1800s. And you were asking about cut nails earlier. We're finding a lot of 19th century generous mixed in with all the other stuff. I could throw a conjecture on what's happening there, but I've learned in the last 3 years not to do that.
I stop now, David.
But there is an absolute, as far as I'm concerned, Craig's still not buying it, but I am convinced there's a line of division where you can almost see the periods of occupation expanding on the site from earlier to later. But that's still yet to be proven. This site is still actually, yeah, you can keep clicking, wrap it up. This is just showing the site more like it looks today. The site is still, believe it or not, in its infancy. My colleague, Craig Chartier, who is the principal archaeologist, this is his site. He's the go-to guy, he's in charge. And his intent is, with the agreement of the the Keys, is to have this being kind of like a continuing education site that's going to be made available to the general public, field students, people that are interested in becoming archaeologists because they don't know any better, they don't make any money at it, you're going to end up pumping gas somewhere anyway. But so that's the plan with this site, because there are going to be outbuildings all over the place, there are going to be barns. There's already a very ripe spot, I think, for a barn site that we kind of were poking at a few days ago. But there's a long, long way to go with this site. I think you can click another one. There's a great.
That was the last
Yeah. But anyway, we do have a long way to go. There's so much that we could talk about. It's hard to kind of make sense of all this in a short period of time. But I hope I kind of helped clue you in, as well as Tom, to kind of what's going on here. And we did want to save a few minutes at the end for Q&A, if anyone so desires.
Before we go to David, there's a couple of points I want to throw out, because the house is supposedly an 1817 building. All the history was lost prior to that because of the fire down in Barnstable, the deeds fire. So that there's no evidence of who owned this house, who started this house. And so we started off with not knowing where this house came from. We still don't really know, but we're pretty close now. Craig Chartier, he actually found the will of Thomas Toby.
Right, yeah.
And in the will of Thomas Toby, it was pretty extensive. He was a very involved individual in the town of Sandwich. He wills the stone end of the house to William, his son, and what do you call it, the other part of the house.
Right, he
to
subdivides
He
the house.
subdivides the house. Gershom, I think, got ripped off. Because that's that side. And in this side, we find upstairs in the display, you'll see there's a cufflink with a G on it. Is that Gershom? Maybe. don't know. But if you look at the will, you read the will, you can clearly see how it very easily fits this site. So is this Thomas Toby's original house? Thomas Toby married Martha Knott in 1650. Martha Knott was the daughter of the widow Knott, and George Knott, who was one of the 10 men from Saugus, the original founders. And if you look at the property survey from 1664, 67, on Water Street, there was the Knotts down closer towards Town Hall, and then there was the Tobys up on this end of Water Street, on both sides. So we get Knotts and Tobys. Interesting. So 1650, the Knotts and the Tobys, they come together for the marriage. We know this addition here, the back addition, roughly, we found a window lead of 16.
Yeah, we did, the window leads, if you've all seen, I'm sure most of you have seen little diamond pane windows are all held together. When those leads are made, glaziers by law have to put their initial and their date when they put them in their little machine and roll them up. We did, on the addition of the house, we found a lead cane with a date of 1671.
So there's the addition. So the bricks, clearly 1650 period, easily. This part here, we're finding evidence of foundation structure to hold up the house. The front part of the house, the parlor side, we haven't found evidence of anything yet where the house is. Still can't find it. Now my house was picked up and moved to its site. Is this where it started? We don't know yet. We believe it could be. 1650 is a magical date with all that's going on with Thomas Toby and Martha Knott. But the structure could be even predate 1650 through the construction. Now, was this George Knott's original house? George Knott passed away 1648. Martha marries Thomas Toby 1650. Is that how this all came? We don't know. There's a lot of Toby Knott opportunity. We don't know more, but we're pretty. A lot of the evidence is leading to this is Thomas Toby's original house. We're pretty clear on that one. Could it be George Knott's original house? Maybe. Don't know yet. There's no real records of that. Anybody knows, please tell us. We're working on it. So the will has been a great tool in helping us, get our minds wrapped around this. Although still, we don't know. We don't clearly. Another point Dave touched on. Now here's my house sitting on 1 acre, and then here's this part, which is another acre and a half, which was a quote building lot. Well, I now have Stonehenge in my backyard. I'm not going to be the person to build a McMansion on it. Great views of the pond and all. I'm not going to do it. That's crazy. It's such a wonderful teaching opportunity because when's the last time a double-sided 17th century house was found?
Intact. Just think of any.
Doesn't happen. They're all destroyed. We have archaeologists down in Jamestown as well as Mount Vernon that are just, they can't wait to get up here and see this. They're calling it a national treasure. So the intention, my wife and I, is to start a foundation. And still looking for the foundation. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a nonprofit, and we're going to fundraise. We've already had multiple children come from different grades. We have a teacher who's left. The 8th grade's coming on November 4th. They're coming. We have there's an all-school for girls up in Boston that's coming down on, I think, the 23rd, whatever the date is. 27. So there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of need, and there's a lot of opportunity to teach children, but also universities, having students come down and work with Dave and work with Greg. This could be a teaching and a historic site for the town of Sandwich, and it could be done on for the next 20 years. There's so much. We just scratched the surface, and it's